My name is Peter Oram. I teach in EMBS 3410, and I'm going old school. I think this is my only slide. I'm an EA, an environmental assessment practitioner, so I work for a consulting company and I do environmental assessment work throughout Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, Atlantic Canada, but I've done some elsewhere. So people I've worked for include landfill operators, mining companies, quarry operators, we've done some larger marine infrastructure projects and things like that. And to tie into the talk a little earlier on the Catholicism side of things, I realize now that probably the reason I decided to teach was to do some penance for the crappy marks that I got at Mount A. So thank you for the opportunity for coming back here to do some penance. So what I wanted to do is just briefly, because there are some good news stories related to environmental assessment, I wanted to share 5 of those because I have 5 minutes. And I also would like to thank the students in my class for the opportunity to work through some of they have a lot of conspiracy theories related to environmental assessment and some negativity. I think I've been able to brainwash / work with them so that they're generally positive about environmental assessment as well. So this is sort of like the report from the field here. So one of the things that environmental assessment, a good news aspect of it, is that environmental assessment now regularly involves First Nations, it regularly involves communities, it regularly involves environmental NGO groups, and regularly involves the general public. If I contrast that with the many decades ago that I started in this, the whole idea of environmental assessment was a closed shop. It was basically tick the box, pretend that you went through the process, make it look good, pretend that you talked to some communities, but it is very much an engaged process. On a regular basis, I sit down with people from a variety of perspectives and groups at the pre-environmental assessment stage to talk about how they should be consulted, how they'd like to be consulted, what they think is good about a project, what they think is bad. So it is, the term that I've been using in the course is that it's now meaningful. In the old days, you simply were looking for a regulatory tick box or political. It is meaningful now. So the good news is that it regularly, EAs routinely involve a variety of people. Another good news aspect of that is that there are now protocols, guidance documents. There are expectations that are written down when it comes to environmental assessment. If I contrast that with the old days, it's the same kind of a thing. It was, well, maybe it would be a good idea if you talk to this community. Maybe it would be a good idea if you talk to that person. The policies, protocols, procedures, guidance documents, and everything that are in place now create environmental assessment process that is meaningful, and everybody should take some confidence in that. The old days was sort of it was more important to make it look good as opposed to having meaningful engagement. Another good news story sort of from the field is that there's now funding available. In the old days, with environmental assessment, it was basically completely up to community groups, NGOs, and others to self-fund, to be able to push their way into a process to have involvement. It's very different now. The avenues for involvement are multiple, and in many cases there's funding available to do that. So that's a positive aspect. Another thing that I think is, and I keep doing this sort of the compare and contrast to the old days, but that's why it's a good news story now, is that EAs are transparent. In the old days, when you went through the environmental assessment process, it was very much closed. It was difficult to understand who met with who, what the project was, what the process was, what are we trying to do, what level of government is involved, what level of assessment is required. So it was closed. Many of the documents were filed, but they weren't viewed publicly. They were not available on a company website. They were not available publicly. So there is now Canadian Environmental Assessment Agency website. Everything is documented well. You can, Freedom of Information Act, you can get that information. No side deals and side letters and things like that. And the other thing that I really like about it, even though I'm old, I like the fact that it's still dynamic, and environmental assessment is not static. It's a process. and processes change, they improve. So if you think EA suck, then you should get involved in them because it's not a spectator sport. Thanks.